You know, as Southwest Florida's only law school, we invite you to visit us at our North Naples campus in the Vineyards. I'm very proud of our law school. It's a special place. It's a place where we not only train lawyers in the finest technical and doctrinal skills, but we do that understanding that the law is inextricably founded on morality and ethics, and we want to train and graduate moral and ethical lawyers to change the legal culture and thereby to change the greater culture. And I'd like to invite you to enjoy a short video that we've prepared about the law school so you get to know us a little bit better. Thank you.
Tom Monahan's vision for Ave Maria School of Law was to create a national law school that would be unlike any other. A law school that trains the next generation of leaders with impeccable technical skills and a firm commitment to the moral and ethical values of our Catholic faith. We share a rich heritage with our sister school, Ave Maria University, yet we are two distinct institutions, governed and operated independently. Our location in North Naples in the Vineyards provides us with an unparalleled opportunity for growth and development to continue our commitment as a vital part of the Southwest Florida community.
Ave Maria School of Law is the only law school in Southwest Florida. Our students have many opportunities for practical experience through externships and our clinical programs.
The mission of Ave Maria School of Law goes beyond robust academics. Our faculty includes dedicated scholars and skilled practitioners who are committed to serving the needs of our students. Students of all faith traditions are represented from throughout the country and abroad.
My professors have had a huge impact on my legal education. One of the first things I noticed was how challenging the classes were and how engaging and interesting the professors were. They are always accessible. They're also good mentors. They want us to succeed and they want us to do well, and they're available to help.
My professors have provided me the opportunity to understand the basis for a legal education. That's the value that my professors have taught me. The value of a legal education can change the world around us.
Students at Ave Maria School of Law learn not only the law, but also what undergirds it. As a result, our students more fully appreciate and better understand the development of the legal system, the human dignity of their clients, and law as a vocation.
Justice Scalia, whom I admire, helped form our school, and I get to hear stories about the roots of our school and see the mission that it carries today. And I think the biggest thing for us here at Ave Maria is how we do our jobs, how we're lawyers, which is commitment to excellence. Firstly, though, a commitment to God, and secondly, to our clients that we serve. And I think that's the best way for law to be practiced, and that's what I hope to contribute as well.
The Ave Maria School of Law offers a distinctive legal education, an education characterized by the harmony of faith and reason.
We have a very, very rich tradition here at the law school of respecting not only the truths given to us by the church, but also to respect the natural law as it has come to us down through the common law. So this school is faith and reason, but it is also a school that is fully American, because we hope that by the work that we do here, that we will be able to make American society even better than it already is, and to be a beacon to the rest of the world.
Training future leaders who will act justly, who will restore the freedoms we have lost, and who will stand for the principles of our founding fathers are found in the men and women being educated by Ave Maria School of Law.
My scholarship is meaningful to me because I wouldn't be here without it. So I'm incredibly thankful to our benefactors and the generosity they showed, which allowed myself and many of our classmates to come here.
I'm very proud to serve as president and dean of Ave Maria School of Law, a national law school with an excellent reputation for educating lawyers who serve the law, their clients, and the common good, with both professionalism and integrity. I'm also proud of our ranking as the #1 law school in the country for the devout. I hope you will join me in supporting Ave Maria School of Law. Your investment of time, talent, and treasure will help us to place the next generation of lawyers, lawmakers, and judges to positions of leadership in the United States, where they will make a real difference in defending our Constitution, promoting the culture of life, and restoring the freedoms we've lost.
We need your help to support our scholarship program so that deserving students can attend our law school. We are also embarking on a plan to purchase our campus and welcome your support. This opportunity will give us the capital to fund faculty endowments and scholarships and to provide a permanent campus here in Naples. Join us in this noble mission to train tomorrow's leaders who will protect the freedoms we know and love.
You know, we're very proud of our ranking as the #1 law school in the country for the devout, and I hope you get a chance to meet the faculty, staff, students, and alumni who are here, because that's the reason why we were able to achieve that ranking. You know, a little earlier I told you that Brett Bayer was instrumental in helping to arrange for Charles Krauthammer to make this visit, and Brett has prepared a little video. This may even be a surprise, I think, to Dr. Krauthammer, so I'd like you to enjoy this video, please.
Good evening. I'm Brett Bayer in Washington. I'm sorry I could not be down there with you tonight for this great event with my good friend Charles Krauthammer for the Ave Maria Law School. I thought Charles might feel at home if he heard the special report music to start out, since he sits next to me here almost every night on the special report panel. You know, Naples is a home away from home for me. My mom, Pat Bayer, who should be there tonight. Hi, Mom. She calls Naples home year-round. My in-laws have a place in Naples. My wife and I, Amy and I, have a condo in Naples too. So Charles, welcome to Naples. I spoke to an Ave Maria Law School event a couple of years ago, and you know, it's a special place. Recently ranked the #1 Catholic law school in America for the devout, while both Ave Maria University and Ave Maria Law School were founded by entrepreneur Tom Monaghan. They are two distinct institutions. A lot of people don't know that. Actually, Ave Maria Law School, the School of Law, is just a few miles east of here on Vanderbilt Road in the Vineyards. You know, I could say a lot about Charles, but I won't. Most of you know exactly who Charles is, and you know him for either his columns or his verbal op-eds here on the Special Report panel, or other Fox shows. We don't like to talk about them. I recently put together an hour special on Charles around the launch of his book. When he talks, Washington listens. Charles Krauthammer, his uniquely American story, his journey from MD to the Pulitzer Prize, how he overcame a devastating accident with a determination to lead, a life that matters. You were a little reticent when we started this project. What's your thought about all this?
I don't like it.
Full disclosure, I've been trying to convince Charles Krauthammer to sit for an interview for some time. Secretary Kerry on the Hill today talking about not one where he simply shares his thoughts on the news of the day.
I suspect there's going to be another twist here.
But one where he pulls back the curtain and reveals, beyond the extraordinary writer and influential thinker, the life of an intensely private man.
Look, when I say I don't like it, I'm not averse to the spotlight. I'm not going to pretend somebody who's on television every night doesn't enjoy it. But when it comes to interior life, it's not something that's very interesting to me.
More disclosure. Charles Krauthammer is a colleague and friend. But he only agreed to cooperate on a Fox News reporting profile reluctantly as part of the publicity campaign for, yes, a new book. Things That Matter is not a confessional memoir or scandalous kiss and tell. It's a collection of newspaper and magazine pieces from the Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist. Or maybe it's more than that.
Are you decoding my book?
I am decoding it right now.
Like it's entirely about me, but it's all written in hieroglyphics.
Which lights you up more, baseball or chess when you're in the game?
There's no comparison. It's chess.
Do you still play chess?
No, I gave it up. It's an addiction.
Completely.
It's a poison. I mean, it's, you reach a point when you're on the internet, middle of the night and you're playing speed chess, where you realize you're in a motel room and you're drinking Aqua Velva.
So be prepared for a great night here at the Ritz. Sit back, open your ears, and get ready for some questions. I think Charles is taking questions at the end of this, and maybe you can stump him better than I do here on the panel every night. He's a great friend. I think the world of him. And tonight, he's all yours. Enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, the author of the best-selling book, Things That Matter, Dr. Charles Krauthammer.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. After that, I think it's all downhill from here. So. It was a great evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see you. Thank you very much, Brett. Rather odd speaking to a video screen, for that very kind introduction. There are nice introductions and there are kind introductions. A nice introduction is where they list all your achievements. They get it transcribed and notarized and they send your mother a copy. The kind introductions is where they leave stuff out. That was an exceedingly kind introduction. For example, my good friend Brett left out the fact that I was once a speechwriter for Walter Mondale. I like letting that settle in slowly. So people ask me, how do you go from Walter Mondale to Fox News? And I tell them it's rather simple. I was young once. The other part that Brett left out is the fact that I used to be a psychiatrist. Actually, in reality, I'm still licensed as a psychiatrist. But the fact is that I'm right now a psychiatrist in remission. Doing very well, thank you. I haven't had a relapse in 25 years. I'm sometimes asked to compare what I do today as a political analyst in Washington with what I used to do as a psychiatrist in Boston. Don't get ahead of me now. It's an easy one, right? You can see where this is going. I tell people that in both lines of work, I deal every day with people who suffer from paranoia and delusions of grandeur. Not that different. The only difference is that the paranoids in Washington have access to nuclear weapons. Makes the stakes a little higher, the work a little more interesting. I'm very happy to be here tonight. I'm honored to be introduced by Brett. I'm delighted that Pat Bear is here. She was the one. She and Brett were the ones who instrumental in having me come here. I've learned a lot about your school. I'm really admiring very much of what you do, what you've achieved. Very happy to be here, particularly out of the northern snows. It's amazing. It's amazing how much it snows with all that global warming. But truth be told, as I said to your colleagues a little earlier tonight, I'm just happy to be anywhere where Juan Williams can't interrupt me. I'll be sure to tell them how you feel. They love you in Naples, Juan. Come on down. So, as I understand the program tonight, right now I'm your hors d'oeuvres, then you're going to have a real meal, and then I come back as dessert for about a half hour of Q's and A's. On television, that's called a tease, so stick around for the second part. But the first part, I'm going to give you a report from Washington, where I live and where I work, and try to interpret for you the primitive rituals of this town, which are sometimes hard to understand. And I, again, was explaining to your colleagues a little bit earlier tonight that in the early years of the Obama administration, I would deliver addresses that would leave my audiences so thoroughly depressed. I would hear sobbing from the back row, weeping. I'd hear the gnashing of teeth, the rending of garments, the whole thing. And the only way to send people home safely would be to offer my services as a psychiatrist and offer to write a prescription for antidepressants for anybody who needed it just to get home that night. Well, I'm tired of leaving my audiences depressed, and I don't want to have to resort to pharmacological needs to cure them. So I've decided to cure you all rhetorically. I'm here to cheer you up tonight. I guess you could sum up the talk as the world is going to hell in a handbasket, but it's going to get better. And here's why. Now, to go to here's why, I want to go back and do a little bit of history of the Obama years. And I want you to try to look at this through a slightly different prism. It is very common, very understandable, very normal to be quite disgusted with the goings-on in Washington, with the pettiness, the ad hominems, the Harry Reids, and the other things that are terminally annoying about Washington. But you mustn't lose sight of one thing, and that is that it isn't very often that one is given the opportunity to live through a great national debate. We generally have them once per generation. Everything that we've been discussing, debating, arguing about, screaming and gridlocking over, can, I think, be subsumed under one larger great debate that we've been involved in ever since Obama was sworn into the presidency. And that is, and it is the ultimate question for a democracy, the size, the scope, the reach, the power of government. Or to put it more generally, more grandly, this is the debate we've been having. The nature of the American experiment, or to put it even in its most largest possible terms, the nature of the social contract between citizen and state. And I will get to this because it has particular relevance for an institution for the devout, which is your law school, and for people of faith everywhere in America. That's one of the areas where this acute debate has now come home to hit, where the Supreme Court will be ruling, where you feel, as you should feel, personally involved. But that's one of the very many areas. We have a very ambitious, very ideologically aggressive liberalism in power, has been in power since 2009, and the country as a result has been debating whether that is the way to go, whether that kind of change in the nature of the relationship between citizen and state is what the country needs. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's sort of an honor to live through that because the future of the country hangs on it. And we don't always have this debate. We had it in the early 1980s, in the early Reagan days, and now it has returned as it does once a generation. So in some sense, I think it's something to be grateful for, particularly if you think, as I do, that the right side is going to win. It's not going to win overnight, it never does. But I think it will prevail, and I'll try to explain to you why. But to start at the beginning, we get a new president coming into office, and he's very ideologically ambitious. I would not characterize Barack Obama as a liberal. You know what a liberal is? A liberal is somebody who doesn't care what you do as long as it's mandatory. That's run-of-the-mill American liberalism. Like a Clinton, you know, center-left. But that's not who Barack Obama is. Barack Obama is a man of the left. So it wasn't very clear when he ran in 2008, but it became very clear when he became president and when he gave a speech. This was his first State of the Union address, February 24, 2009. Now, you don't remember this speech because you have real lives. You do things, you make things, you create things, you get involved in community, you have families. I, for my sins, have to watch this guy 24 hours a day. Clearly, my sins are many. So I remember the speech, I remember every detail of it, and I remember the utter surprise and almost admiration I had for the boldness of this ideological vision which he proposed, every inch of which I oppose, but by the fact that he made no attempt to hide who he was and what he wanted to do. And in this speech, he was very clear, and he said, I didn't come here to change America at the edges, to make a little reform here and there, to be a Bill Clinton who would triangulate, and basically was someone who was not aggressively trying to change the country. I'm here to do it. And he was very specific in how he wanted to do. He said he was going to do it in 3 ways: healthcare, education, and energy. Think about that. Healthcare is 1/6 of the economy. Education, as you know, is the future. Energy is the sinews of an industrial economy. You control the production and the pricing. And you have control of what Lenin would call the commanding heights of the industrial economy. This is the man's ambitious, and where does he want to take us? I have argued that he is not a conventional liberal. Obama is a social democrat on the West European model. People ask me, what's a social democrat? The only way to explain it is to tell a famous story about Winston Churchill. You remember after the Second World War, Churchill lost the election, becomes leader of the opposition. Clement Attlee, head of the Socialist Labour Party, becomes prime minister. One day, Churchill goes down to the men's room of the House of Commons, and there, standing all alone, there's nobody else, is Clement Attlee, standing at one of the urinals. It's okay, that's as weird as it gets. Churchill goes to the very end of the men's room, about 15 stalls away, one of the urinals, and Prime Minister Attlee's a little bit puzzled. He looks over and says, feeling a bit standoffish today, are we, Winston? And Churchill looks over and says, not at all, my dear Clement. It's just that every time you see something large, you want to nationalize it. I hope that's okay, Dean Millhauser. You know, I'm not even sure that story isn't apocryphal, but I don't care. As we say in the column writing business, that story is simply too good to check. Churchill also once said of Attlee that he was a sheep in sheep's clothing. But that's neither here nor there. I just threw it out because I like that line. Obama sees large things. He wants to nationalize them. Healthcare, 1/6 of the economy, the most intimate relationship a government can have with its people is to manage what happens to them in illness. Education, we talked about. Energy, of course. And the point to understand is that Obama, and he speaks about this openly all the time, I mean, his main goal is equality, right? He talks about inequality in income, talks about inequality between the classes, and this, remember, that's the theme on which he ran in 2012 and won re-election. It was the theme of his second inaugural address. And this idea of equality, look, we've had a classic, this is a continuation of a 200-year-old debate between left and right since the French Revolution, equality versus liberty. Those are sort of the fundamental virtues, principles on either side. And generally speaking, the left stands for equality, the right stands for liberty. Generally speaking, Western Europe has decided to promote equality over liberty, and we know what that means: higher taxation, more regulation, more security, more protection, more leveling between the classes, and more intrusiveness of government into the lives of the individual. The American experiment, the American idea, is a very different one. There's a reason that we have in New York Harbor a Statue of Liberty and not a Statue of Equality. If you look at the founding documents, this is who we are. We believe in helping the poor. We believe in helping the helpless. And this is both a commonality of the Catholic tradition, of course, the social gospel in many ways of Christianity, and of course of the idea of the decent state, the idea of the not entitlement state, which is Europe, but of the safety net, that a decent society provides a safety net for the least among them. So that is the American way. But it doesn't sacrifice initiative, liberty, dynamism, mobility, enterprise, innovation, and risk in the pursuit of equality. So those are basically the fundamental poles between left and right. And Obama is far out of the American mainstream, I would say even for liberalism, in being on the side of far more equality over liberty, solidarity over enterprise. And to me, that's sort of the fundamental debate that he's introduced. In pursuit of equality, you need a very heavy hand of government, very heavy hand. The very extreme of that, of course, are the totalitarian socialism. That's not who Obama is. It's more the West European, which is very heavily regulated, very heavily taxed, and in which the pursuit is equality over liberty, and the results are very clear. So that, to me, was the ideological challenge Obama threw out. And he only managed to enact part of his agenda. He did not succeed with energy, as we know. He tried to get cap and trade, which is basically to give government control over pricing of the energy economy. But even with the control of the House and the Senate in 2009 and 2010, he didn't come close. Rejected, because it's not the way Americans like to see their economies run. On education, he's talked about in many ways nationalizing higher education, has not succeeded in that. He talks about nationalizing education for 4-year-olds with a kind of federal universal preschool. That's not going anywhere. But he did succeed, or at least to the extent you want to call it, success with health care. And this is sort of the issue of our time, for many reasons. But the most important reason is this. Obamacare is not just the symbol, but it is the living embodiment of this kind of hyper-intrusive, hyperactive, hyper-regulatory liberalism. This is Obamaism in action. This is the test of that ideology. And one of the reasons for my optimism is that you rarely get an ideology like that which is at stake, where the debate is not just a theoretical one. What might it do? What will it do? What could it do? We're seeing what it does. And that's why Democrats and liberals are running scared for the upcoming election. And that's why the future of this kind of, I would call it hyper-liberalism, West European style social democracy, is so much in jeopardy. which is the reason for my optimism being somewhat on the other side of the scale. What is so interesting is not just that Obamacare is failing. What is so interesting is what the introduction of Obamacare began. The political dynamic and the process. Here's the administration coming into office feeling very heady, feeling it can do anything it wants, coming into office right after and actually during a financial panic with the country prostrate, the country sort of very demoralized, and they thought this was their fatal mistake. They thought this is 1933. They thought we are FDR on the New Deal, where the country was truly on its back, 25% unemployment, and was willing to give the federal government leeway to do anything it wanted to try to resurrect the country that was truly on its back. They thought Americans in 2009 was America 1933, and boy, did they get it wrong. They didn't realize that they were given a mandate to fix the economy and to restore American confidence. They were not given a mandate to revolutionize the social structure of the United States and to radically alter the relationship between citizen and state. But they decided to go for it. And they decided to go for it first with a stimulus, $830 billion, the largest spending bill in galactic history, which I predicted at the time, and that I know is true, will leave not a trace. You know, at least FDR left behind the Hoover Dam. These guys are leaving behind the ruins of that Solyndra plant out there in the desert. That's quite a legacy. And the second thing they did, of course, was Obamacare, the thing that liberals have been trying to do for 100 years, which is to essentially nationalize health care, to put the federal government and its experts in charge of health care. So they went ahead and they got this done by the barest of majorities. Two things about that. Number one, it is quite out of the American tradition. If you go back to all the great sweeping pieces of legislation, Social Security, Medicare, civil rights, they have always been passed with a large contingent of the opposition party supporting it. There's always been a sense that when you do something revolutionary in the Congress through the laws, you need to have some kind of consensus behind it. You don't have to. It's not illegal if you don't. It's not unconstitutional to do it the way Obama did and Harry Reid did and Nancy Pelosi did with not a single vote from the GOP. You're allowed to do it, but it's not in the American spirit, and they are reaping the whirlwind from doing it in that way. If you don't have a buy-in, if you don't have some agreement, if you don't have some consensus, if you haven't worked together with the other party to bring them into something, don't ever expect they'll be there to bail you out. They are not, and they shouldn't be there to bail them out because they're not deserving of being bailed out. So that's the first thing. That's why they're out there on their own. The second thing is they did not listen to the American people. They did think that they could do anything they wanted because the country was so demoralized when they came into office. And it was encapsulated by a statement by Rahm Emanuel. You remember Rahm Emanuel? He was Obama's chief of staff for a few years before he was released into the wild. With apologies to anybody here from Chicago. Rahm said a crisis is a terrible thing to waste, right? What they meant was the country's in a crisis. We can act now in a way we can never act otherwise. We're going to do something revolutionary. We're going to control a sixth of the economy, and we're going to get it done without any Republicans, and it'll be a fact. Be like Putin in Crimea. It'll be a fact. We will take it over. Well, Putin will be in Crimea for several hundred years but Obamacare is not going to last a hundredth of that long. They made up. So they went for the gold, and they passed it. And what they didn't see is that the American people are not passive, they are not prostrate, they are not demoralized, and they won't let themselves be run over by arrogant people in Washington who think they have the truth and know how to tell them how to live. So something happens, quite remarkable. I don't know that anybody would have predicted it. Obama enacts this piece of legislation. Then what happens? While the debate is going on, as people can see this coming, something very amazing happens. A movement begins. It's not led, it's not organized, it's not in any way coherent. It's simply ordinary Americans starting to show up at demonstrations and at town halls the summer of 2009, basically saying, we don't want to go this way. We understand the larger picture here. This is kind of European social democracy, hyper-regulation, hyper-taxation. We know where this is going, and we know what the spirit of this is. It's not American. It's not the way we want to see ourselves governed. This is a radical change in the relationship, again, the bigger debate, the relationship between citizen and state, and we don't want it. It went by the name of Tea Party, but it stood for much more. Because for every person who showed up at the town hall in the middle of winter in Iowa, there were 9 people who stayed home but shared the same sentiments and who showed up on Election Day in 2010. That's when the press began to have respect for this movement. Remember, at the beginning it dismissed it, it ridiculed it, it demonized it, did everything it could, but you couldn't ignore it after the election of 2010. The election of 2010 was action and reaction. That was reaction to this overreach, this power grab by the temporary majority yielded by the 2008 election, which then was utterly dissipated and destroyed by the election of 2010. Obama called it a shellacking. A friend of mine said it wasn't so much an election 2010, it was a restraining order. And in fact, it's exactly what it was. That was the end of the Obama administration in terms of legislation. That was it. They got Obamacare through. They haven't gotten through anything of any importance ideologically ever since. And that's because they overreached, because the country, this amazing country where people simply have this sense of what is sort of constitutionally proper in the American system, stood up and said no. And they voted the people out of office. In the House, Republicans lost, Democrats lost 63 seats. That's the most in 70 years. They lost 5 seats in the Senate. And the most important thing that was actually overlooked on Election Day was the fact that Democrats lost 680 seats in the state houses. 19 of the 99 state houses flipped from Democratic to Republican control. Do any of the students at the law school know why there are only 99 state houses? I love asking this. I heard Nebraska, great. Unicameral, what a great word. Unicameral, I love that word. Nebraska has only 1 house. As you see, I'm easily distracted. Can't do this on television, or the producer screams in my ear. That's why we all have the funny earpieces, and the producer can scream at you. Rap, that means you're done, you're out of here. But I digress. So, 19 state houses flip. What do you get? I'll give you just 2 highlights of what came as a direct result of hyperliberalism, overreach, reaction in 2010. Wisconsin and Michigan. Wisconsin, the famously liberal state, elects a Republican governor, a Republican House and Senate, and passes the first sort of restriction on the overweening powers of government unions in the United States. The irony is unbelievably stark because Wisconsin is historically very liberal, and Wisconsin was in fact the first state in the Union in 1959 to legalize government unions. And now it becomes the first state where, as a direct result of the 2010 elections, Republicans elected to office actually act on what they said and really constrained the government unions that were sending the state into bankruptcy. And that was Scott Walker, who is right now one of the leading candidates for the presidency. The other thing that happened was Michigan. Michigan, mirabile dictu, of all the states, home of the UAW, home traditional great originator of the great industrial unions, becomes right to work. So this is the rebellion against Obamacare. All of these developments, both at the national level, the loss of the House of Representatives, and the very weakening of the Obama presidency, and then, of course, at the state level below that, Wisconsin, Michigan, many other places, begin this sort of counter-revolution. Now, in a normal play on Broadway, or as I would have written it, Act 3 would have just neatly wrapped all this up, right? Action, reaction, and then the good guys win the next election. However, and I predicted that around the end of 2011, but what I did is I made the fatal mistake of underestimating the GOP genius for losing unlosable elections. In 2008 was an election that Republicans could not have won no matter what. 2012 was an election they should not have lost no matter what. In 2008, we were coming out of the worst financial crisis since the collapse of 1929. It happened 6 weeks before the election. We've never had a collapse so proximal to an election. We had a very weak candidate. John McCain is a hero of mine. I love the man. He really is a national treasure, but he was a lousy candidate. And I mean, all the winds were going the other way. I mean, the conditions were such in 2008 that the Italian Communist Party could have won that election. Now, some people will tell you that it did win that election. But not me. I would never say. Never engage in such calumny. It wouldn't even cross my mind. So 2012, right, you can't lose this election. It's the worst recovery since the Second World War. Obama's a very weak president at home and abroad. We got everything going for us, and what do? This is the genius of Republicans, right? 2010, we win the election by running essentially on Obamacare, on the overreach, on this one issue that, as I said a little earlier, is both the symbol and the embodiment of everything Obama stands for. So that's the issue. You got to make the case. You win the election, you get hoisted on the shoulders of the people, and they carry you to the White House. So what does the GOP do? It nominates the one man in a country of 300 million that can't make the case about Obamacare because he invented Obamacare. It's not easy to do. Now, I like Mitt Romney. I admire Mitt Romney. I supported Mitt Romney. I voted for him, and I think he would have made an excellent president. But he was not a great candidate. That was one reason. The other reason is he came to politics late in life. There's nothing wrong with that. He was asked about that, in fact, in one of the debates. Newt said, where were you in the 1990s when we were, taking over in the House and changing the direction of the country? And Mitt said very honestly, I wasn't there. I was in the private sector. There's nothing dishonorable. In fact, it's a very noble life to create jobs, to expand the economy, to be involved in creation of wealth and jobs and all that. But he said, and he admitted, and I came to politics late. The problem with his coming to politics late is that he spoke conservatism as a second language. I'll give you one example. In one of the debates, he was trying to make the case of how ideologically reliable he was as a conservative. And he said that he had run, quote, a severely conservative administration. Now think about that. Severe is a word that you generally associate with head wounds and tropical storms. I've never heard it associated with governance. It's just not the kind of thing that comes trippingly off the tongue of a fluently conservative candidate. But that actually, ironically, is a reason for my optimism. And I'm going to conclude, it's a long conclusion, so settle in. With just a couple of reasons why I am optimistic and why I think that I think it goes without saying, Republicans have a very good chance, I'd say a 3-to-1 chance, to take control of the Senate, and they have a more than 50-50 chance to win the White House in 2016. One of the reasons is this. Unlike the last time in 2012, when Republicans had an exceedingly weak field, this time I think we have quite a strong field. We have a whole group of young, dynamic conservatives who can make the case. And the fundamental premise that I'm operating under is that making the case wins you the election. This is a center-right country. You get a candidate who can make the center-right case, who can make the case for smaller government, less intrusiveness, more liberty, more enterprise, more equality, with a very socially conscious safety net, but not an entitlement state. You make the case of the safety net state against the entitlement state, against the traditional American state of limited government, against the West European social democracy of unlimited government, and you will win it every time. But you got to have people who can make the case and who know how to make it, and I think we do. We have a very dynamic young set of governors, starting with Scott Walker, Bobby Jindal. In Louisiana, we've got Jeb Bush, former governor of Florida. Of course, you know that Jeb has one problem, and we know what it is. It's his last name. I have a solution. Change it. How about this? Jeb Ochocinco. The beauty of that one is that you get two constituencies at once, Hispanics and wide receivers. Where was I? Oh yeah, governors. We're doing governors. And of course, the famous Chris Christie, who until a few months ago was the front runner. Now, you know, he ran into trouble when he got a little bit cozy with Obama during Hurricane Sandy. It was said in the press that he gave Obama a bear hug, you know, during the fateful last week. I think that's not quite accurate. It was more like a lap dance. Of course, you've never heard me say that on television because the image is simply too disturbing. I was upset with Christie when he did that. And you might remember I said on the air that we should put him 90 days in quarantine, and that's about it. But he served his sentence, and I think he ought to be let out. But then, of course, he ran into the Bridgegate problem. Now here I'm truly disappointed. I mean, it does not speak well of the state of revenge in New Jersey. In the old days, when men were men, you wanted to send the mayor of Fort Lee a message. You put a horse's head in his bed. You sent a dead fish in the mail. You make him hear a knock on the door, and when he comes to the door, who does he see there? Tanya Harding holding a baseball bat. That was the America we knew, the New Jersey. 3 lanes on the George Washington Bridge. Is this what New Jersey has come to? My God, talk about American decline. But I think he will recover from that. And he's no longer the front runner, but he's among the top tier, so he will be out there. And despite this, which I think will probably, unless there's an email somewhere, smoking gun, will probably go away, I think he'd be a very strong candidate. And then, of course, we have the senators, Marco Rubio, who I think is still attractive. He had a tough year last year because of immigration reform, but Marco Rubio is very strong. You've got Rand Paul, not exactly my cup of tea, but a very strong and articulate representative of libertarianism. Ted Cruz, you've got others. It'll be a very strong field, and I think it'll be able to present and to make the case. And why do I think that if you make the case, you're going to win? Because we are a center-right country, and it's not just that I say this. If you go back to the Gallup poll, just about every year for the last 30 years, they ask people to self-identify ideologically. The numbers are always the same, within a point or two. 40% of Americans self-identify as conservatives. About 20% self-identify as liberals. And about 35% self-identify as moderates. Now, the other 5% have no idea what the hell is going on. And of course, they're the ones who decide elections, but what can you do? But I think in a center-right country, as we are and we remain, and I would put before you as first piece of evidence, as you would in a case before a jury, as the first piece of evidence, is this unbelievable, remarkable, spontaneous emergence of Tea Party. Tea Partyism, again, it's not just the individuals or the leaders you see, but just that sentiment that came spontaneously. This doesn't happen in other countries, it happens here, because it speaks to sort of the fundamental idea of America and how Americans see it. Despite the dependency, despite the handouts, despite the fear that conservatives and many Americans have, that the more entitlements you heap on people, the more dependency you create, you might reach a tipping point where those people are so dependent on government that they will always support the more pro-government, expansive government party. We are nowhere near there. Europe is there, we are not. And that's the last reason for my optimism. When we had this same great debate about the size, the power, the reach, the scope of government, and Ronald Reagan came along, and you remember what Reagan said within 10 minutes of becoming president. In his inaugural address, he said, first inaugural address, government is not the solution to our problems, government is the problem. This was a revolutionary refutation and rejection of the very fundamental idea of the New Deal and of the Great Society. Reagan stood for something sort of radically ideologically different, and Reagan made that stick. That became the governing ideology of the country. What makes something the governing ideology? When your party inevitably lose power, as you always do in a democracy, the other guys come in and they ratify, they vindicate your ideology by retaining it. What did Bill Clinton, the Democrat, say in his 1996 State of the Union address? The era of big government is over. The same way that Tony Blair, with the new Labor Party, ratified, accepted, sort of perpetuated Thatcherism in his country. That's what happened here. And that's the reason Obama is so ideologically ambitious. Obama, from the very beginning, when he was still in the legislature in Illinois, saw himself as the man who would overthrow the new conservative ascendancy that Reagan had ushered in 1980-81. He was going to reverse that. He was going to start a new liberal era. That explains the ambitious political agenda he set out at the beginning. He really wanted to change America fundamentally. He said very interestingly in one interview in 2008 when he was running He said admiringly of Ronald Reagan altered the ideological trajectory of the country in a way that Bill Clinton never did. Now, in part, that was meant to enrage the Clintons during the primary campaign, and it did. But there was a very fundamental truth about what Reagan had done, and Obama sees himself as the man who would reverse that. Now, why are we in a different position today than we were 30 years ago when Reagan was making the same argument? 30 years ago, the argument between the big government and small government types, between the safety net state and the entitlement state, was a theoretical argument. They were predicting what the future would be based on certain understandings of what are the dynamics of society and government. Today, the argument is no longer theoretical. Why? Because history has spoken, and it has spoken in Europe. We have this remarkable advantage. Europe is kind of a time machine for us. It got started on the entitlement state 20 years before we did. They are 20 years ahead of where we are, meaning they show us where we will be if we don't get off the track we are now. The debt, the spending, the dependency, the overregulation, it's all there. But it hit there already has happened. We can see what happened in Greece, see Portugal, Spain, Italy. In Greece, unemployment is 25%. Youth unemployment is 50%. Standard of living has been crushed. Why? Because they finally hit the wall. Today, when we say we're going to hit the wall, we know we are because we can see it already happen in Europe. When Reagan said it, it was very far away, and there were no empirical examples. Herb Stein, who was the chairman of the economic advisors in the Nixon years, once said, it's sort of a lovely tautology, he once said, if something cannot go on, it won't. I love that. It's a tautology, and it is profound. What he meant is, if you do what Europe did, at a certain point you can't go on. Or Thatcher once said, Margaret Thatcher said, the reason socialism doesn't work is that at some point socialists run out of other people's money to spend. That's a less Yoda-like way of saying it. But it's the same thing. If something can't go on, it won't. And we can see that. So not only are we center-right with a preponderantly conservative population, not only do we have a strong young set of candidates who can make the case is easier to make because the case has been made by history and we can see it. And we have this unique, almost providential advantage of having the future shown to us now. So when we make the debate, we can appeal to what's actually happening now and not to what is theoretical. And that's the reason that I will now leave you in a final conclusion, which will be very brief, with my favorite, and this is my sort of optimistic quotation, which is my favorite of all, and it is also from my favorite pundit, Otto von Bismarck. Now, you don't know him as a pundit. You know him as a guy who would invade France every 3 or 4 years. But he was also very witty. Let me just say as an aside that Bismarck was also a genius. He was the one actually who invented Social Security. He was the first government leader. Germany in the 1880s was the first to give government pensions to the elderly. You know what age he chose to give pensions? 70. Do you know what life expectancy was in Germany in 1885? 46. As I said, he wasn't a philanthropist, he was a genius. But he did say, and I've checked this is too good to check, but I checked it anyway. He did say, God looks after children, drunkards, fools, and the United States of America. So let's hope to God he still does. Thank you very much. Thank you.